She had sworn off men for 30 years, an ironclad vow born from betrayal and loss. But in a single breathless moment, inside the mirrored walls of an elevator, a war-hardened single dad caught her before disaster could strike. And something inside her cracked wide open. Was it fate or a dangerous mistake? If you believe some stories are too extraordinary to miss, stay with us until the very last word. And don't forget to subscribe, so you'll be here when the next unexpected miracle begins. The air inside the Kingsley Tech Grand Atrium was electric. Spotlights swept over a sea of investors, journalists, and tech enthusiasts, their faces lit with the glow of massive LED screens. A cutting-edge product launch was in full swing, streamed live to millions across the country. Cameras glided along tracks. The CEO's name, Catherine Kingsley, flashed in bold letters above the stage. Then, without warning, a sharp, metallic screech pierced the hum of polite applause. A plume of smoke began to curl from the seams of one of the glass-paneled elevators. The crowd's chatter shifted to gasps. On the 15th floor display, the numbers froze. Inside, a young girl's terrified cries echoed down the atrium. Near the main doors, Marcus Hale, maintenance manager of the building and a former Navy rescue technician, stood with a clipboard in one hand and a set of tools slung over his shoulder. Moments earlier, Kenneth Brooks, the company's impeccably dressed COO, had cornered him. Kenneth's smile was thin as paper when he muttered just loud enough for bystanders to hear. "Try not to stand too close to the guests. Your uniform might scuff their suits." The laughter from a pair of junior executives stung, but Marcus swallowed it down. He had faced worse than petty insults. The girl's cry came again, sharper this time. A voice in the crowd shouted there was a child inside. Security hesitated, scanning for protocol. The on-site tech team clustered near a control panel, fingers flying, but nothing responded. Marcus dropped the clipboard. He was already moving, weaving through startled guests, his boots gripping the marble floor. "Clear the area," he barked. The firmness in his voice cut through the chaos. Someone tried to block him. Rules, liability. But one look at the fire in his eyes, and they stepped aside. From across the hall, Catherine Kingsley stood at the edge of the stage in her signature white silk blouse and tailored navy suit. Her expression was carved from stone, the kind of measured detachment honed over decades in the public eye. 30 years of avoiding close contact with men had become second nature to her. She had trained herself to keep a careful, clinical distance. Yet she found herself watching this one man cross the floor with a precision that was not panic, but purpose. Marcus reached the elevator doors. Smoke leaked steadily from the narrow gap. He stripped off his jacket, dropped to his knees, and pulled a compact rescue tool from his belt. His fingers found the seam. The sound of metal on metal was followed by the pop of a locking pin giving way. The crowd held its breath. In that instant, the noise of the crowd faded. And for Catherine, it was as if she were watching through a window into another life. One where trust was instinct, not calculation. Inside, the girl's face was pale behind the glass. She coughed, eyes wide with fear. "You're going to be fine," Marcus said, his voice steady as steel. With a grunt, he forced the doors apart, wedged the tool into place, and reached in. Lifting her into his arms, he shielded her with his jacket and stepped backward into the light. For a heartbeat, the atrium fell silent. The smoke curled upward into the beams of the spotlights. Then applause erupted. The sound rolled through the space like a breaking wave. Cameras pivoted to catch the moment. Flashes went off in rapid fire. Marcus handed the child to her grandmother, who clutched her close, tears cutting lines down her cheeks. He didn't linger. He only checked to make sure the girl was breathing evenly before stepping back. On stage, Catherine's hand tightened around the edge of the podium. She had seen competence before, had built her empire on recognizing it in others. But something in the way he moved, calm under pressure, eyes locked only on the person who needed him, caught her off guard. She found herself holding his image in her mind longer than she intended. A microphone squealed. Kenneth Brooks' voice, too smooth, too quick, cut through the applause. A lucky break, nothing more. "Right place, dear, right time," he said, glancing toward Marcus with a dismissive smile. "Just our maintenance man doing his job." Some in the crowd murmured. Others nodded, already framing their headlines. By the time the first reporters began filing stories, the narrative had split in two. On one side, the hero, an unknown man who saved a child in the middle of a global broadcast. On the other, skepticism. Was it staged for attention? A clever PR ploy? Near the security desk, Kelvin Ortiz, the building's head of security, leaned toward a colleague. His voice was low, meant for no one but the person beside him. "That kind of failure doesn't happen on its own," he said. "Not with our systems." His eyes followed Marcus as the man quietly retrieved his jacket from the floor. "And I think someone wanted it to happen." Marcus didn't hear him. He was already walking toward the service corridor, slipping back into the role no one clapped for, making sure the elevators ran, the lights stayed on, and the air was safe to breathe. Yet, somewhere behind him, Catherine's gaze lingered. Her mind replayed the image of smoke, a locked door, and a man who walked into danger without hesitation. She did not know his name, but she would soon. In the far corners of the internet, the live clip began to trend. 2 hashtags emerged. One called him the silent hero. The other questioned the timing. The debate would simmer, fanned by Kenneth's subtle barbs and the speculation of strangers. And in that moment, beneath the noise, the camera flashes, and the half-truths, a connection neither of them understood had begun to take shape. Forged in smoke and steel, in the beating heart of a single rescue that would change everything. The boardroom at Kingsley Tech was designed to impress. Polished walnut walls, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the New York skyline, and a long glass table that seemed to stretch for miles. At the head sat Catherine Kingsley, her posture perfectly straight, fingers resting on a tablet loaded with financial projections. But even her flawless composure couldn't disguise the tension tightening her jaw. The quarterly numbers were solid, but the chatter in the room had nothing to do with profit margins. Instead, the conversation looped back to the same refrain. Optics, stability, public confidence. "We can't ignore the chatter, Catherine," said Gerald Hunt, the longest-serving board member. "Our stock dipped 2 points after that elevator incident, not because of the rescue itself, but because the media started asking about you. Your personal life." Which, added Elise Park, a venture capitalist with a hawk's gaze, has been non-existent for 30 years. Investors want a leader they can relate to, someone grounded. Settled. Catherine's voice was cool. Settled, as in married? Or simply accompanied by someone for the photo ops? "Call it what you will," Gerald said with a faint shrug, "but the perception matters. We need to reassure the market that our CEO isn't—" He hesitated. "Aloof." The word hung in the air. Catherine let it sit for a moment, then exhaled through her nose. It wasn't the first time she'd heard this sentiment. It wouldn't be the last. From the far side of the table, her mother, Karen Kingsley, retired philanthropist and still a force in the family's empire, spoke with the calm authority that had once steered a Fortune 500 company. "Katie, I know how you feel about this, but public image is part of the job. You don't have to fall in love. You simply have to present stability." Catherine's fingers tapped once on the tablet. "I'm allergic to men, Mother. Literally. Contact triggers my skin. You want me to parade one around for the cameras? Karen didn't flinch. You've run this company like a flawless machine for 2 decades. Treat this the same way. Make it a process. Before Catherine could respond, Karina Blake, the head of PR, leaned forward, eyes bright with the gleam of an idea she'd clearly been waiting to drop. What if we make it a feature? A controlled narrative. We launch a live stream series, tasteful of course, where we vet candidates. It's part human interest, part brand engagement. We call it The Selection. Let the public see you setting the terms. You get to define the relationship before it starts. Several board members nodded, murmuring approval. Kenneth Brooks, the COO, smiled with practiced warmth. Brilliant, he said. Nothing wrong with a little transparency. And if it pulls focus from that elevator chaos, all the better. Beneath the table, his thumb traced the edge of his phone. He was already planning how to use this to his advantage. Catherine's gaze swept the room. If I were to agree, the rules would be absolute. Of course, Karina said. We can present them as part of the intrigue. That night, Catherine sat alone in her penthouse, drafting what she called her terms and conditions. They were clinical, stripped of sentiment. No touching. No unsolicited personal questions. No discussion of family history. No assumptions of exclusivity. No public displays of affection beyond what's scripted. She read them over twice. Each line was a safeguard, a wall she'd built and rebuilt over years. If she was going to turn her personal life into a project, she would do it on her terms, down to the smallest clause. But what Catherine didn't know was that her mother had already taken a step beyond her consent. Karen, always 2 moves ahead, had made a discreet call that afternoon. She had asked building services to bring in their top maintenance manager for the selection filming days, ostensibly to ensure lighting and staging ran smoothly. She didn't mention the man's name to her daughter. Marcus Hale. The same man whose jacket had shielded a frightened child only days ago. The man whose quiet competence had played on repeat in Karen's mind. She didn't believe in accidents. 2 mornings later, the plan leaked to the press. Headlines debated whether it was savvy PR or a spectacle. Talk shows picked it apart, half applauding the transparency, half condemning it as a performance. Do we really need to turn the CEO's dating life into a broadcast? One commentator scoffed on live TV. This isn't a reality show. But curiosity was a currency, and Kingsley Tech's stock began to tick upward again. In her office, Catherine read the public's split reactions with her usual detachment. She didn't care if they approved or not. All that mattered was that her rules held, and that no man, no matter how charming or competent, could breach the walls she had built. At least, that's what she thought. The Kingsley Theater had been transformed into a cathedral of spectacle. Velvet drapes framed a stage flanked by mirrored pylons, and a halo of ring lights shimmered like a crown. Cameras floated on cranes. A Steadicam operator traced elegant arcs as a string section pulsed under a pop beat. The show's title, The Selection, glowed across a 60-foot LED wall. Gold letters moved like tides. Audience members filed in wearing cocktail attire and the triumphant expressions of people who expected to witness history under controlled lighting. Backstage, Karina Blake checked her run of show, lips pressed thin until they formed something like a smile. She had fought to keep the tone tasteful. Still, the ratings math demanded heat. She looked toward Kenneth Brooks, who adjusted his cufflinks with the casual confidence of a man who believed he owned every room he entered. "We're chasing reassurance, not a circus," Karina said. Kenneth returned a placid nod. His eyes, however, held a colder calculation. The house lights dimmed, the audience hushed. The MC strode into the spotlight with a microphone and a grin engineered for trust. "Good evening. Welcome to The Selection. Tonight, the nation meets the men who may stand beside one of the most influential leaders in American business." Applause crashed like surf. On cue, the LED wall dissolved into a montage of Catherine Kingsley, boardrooms, factory floors, scholarships announced in gymnasiums where parents cried grateful tears. Then the camera cut to her in a tailored black suit, seated in a clean white chair at center stage, posture impeccable, eyes unreadable. "Ms. Kingsley," the MC said, "thank you for inviting us in." Catherine inclined her head once. The audience leaned forward, as if the movement itself were a revelation. Her hands rested together on her lap. Her presence signaled power calibrated to the millimeter. The procession began. Contestant 1, a cardiothoracic surgeon who had led a mission clinic in Appalachia. He wore his compassion like a well-fitted tux. Contestant 2, a venture-backed founder with flawless stubble and a portfolio of sustainability patents. The camera found his dimple on cue. Contestant 3, a former Olympian turned sports commentator who joked about still being coachable. The MC fed each man ribbon-wrapped prompts, values, charity, resilience, and the men volleyed back with the ease of those fluent in the choreography of public affection. The audience rewarded them with warm bursts of applause. The press gallery, high on the mezzanine, typed supportive adjectives that sounded like investment theses. In the wings, a stagehand whispered into his headset, "Bring up 4 through 6, stand by 7. A lean figure stepped through the shadow, work boots scuffed, navy utility pants, a clean dark t-shirt under a maintenance jacket with a stitched name tag. Marcus. He held a coil of gaffer tape and a small tool pouch. He had been asked to float near the catwalk for any tech hiccups during the broadcast. He kept his eyes on the floor marks. He preferred quiet hallways to spotlights. Contestant 7, the MC announced as the orchestra lifted, a community health advocate with a Harvard MPH. Cameras swung. The advocate spoke of neighborhoods and data. A donor in the third row dabbed a meaningful tear. Contestant 8, a decorated firefighter, a mentor to junior recruits. The firefighter's jawline glittered under powder. The audience rose to its feet. The orchestra hit a triumphant turn. Then the MC's voice relaxed into a comic beat. And finally, a late addition to our lineup, a man of the people, a familiar face in this very building. The LED wall flickered to a live feed of the service corridor camera. The image caught Marcus, mid-step, adjusting a dimmer pack. A ripple of laughter moved through the theater, not cruel exactly, but indulgent, as if the show were charmingly self-aware. Please welcome Mr. Marcus Hale, maintenance manager. A spotlight pinned him at the wing. He squinted once, then stepped forward. The heat of the lamps washed his face. The steel toes of his boots clicked on polished stage. The camera caught a sheen of machine oil on his fingertips. A whisper climbed the rows. Is this a bit? Are they doing a bit? Someone near the press pen said, not quietly enough, "Cute, the working-class wild card." The MC offered a handshake. Marcus nodded instead. "Grease," he said. "Sorry." A mild chuckle, a mild bruise. "Let's begin with a simple question," the MC continued, turning to place himself between Marcus and the white chair where Catherine waited. "What would you consider your greatest assets?" Contestant 1 would have said compassion, 2 would have said vision, 3 would have said teamwork. Marcus looked out, not at the cameras, but toward a balcony where a child-shaped absence tugged at his chest. "Kira," he said, voice level. "My daughter." The audience reaction was not silence. It was something worse, a polite noise shaped like doubt. A few laughed once, quick, embarrassed to be heard, then hid behind their programs. Up on the mezzanine, a blogger typed, "Endearing, naive." The MC recovered with a host's nod. "And outside of family, in pragmatic terms." Marcus met his eyes without hostility. "I keep people safe. I keep systems honest. I fix what others ignore until it's too late. The camera cut to Catherine. Her expression did not change. The line of her mouth was architecture. Yet, her pupils tightened. The way his answers refused the expected choreography registered in her mind, like a metric with predictive value. The next prompt arrived. You are at a benefit gala. You are asked about your 5-year plan. Contestant 9 would have listed boards, scholarships, lean enterprises. Marcus answered, 5 years. Kira is 14. She reads the water. Not just the weather app. I want her to stand at a pier and feel the wind change, to know she can turn a sail. The orchestra's underscoring hiccuped. A lighting tech whispered, We're losing a dimmer chain. Downstage left began to strobe. The center fill dipped to amber. The LED wall shimmered with a ghosting artifact. The MC kept smiling. His eyes darted toward the control booth. A director's voice cracked in the headsets. Stabilize. Stabilize now. Marcus heard the frequency shift. The pitch of panic is universal. He scanned the floor pocket, saw the cable tension at the truss. The dimmer pack he had adjusted earlier, now buzzing with the angry whine of a failing ground. He moved, not rushed, not apologetic, simply precise. He knelt at the stage edge, reached into his pouch. A handheld tester chirped. His fingers loosened a clamp. He stripped back half an inch of jacket, reseated a connector, tightened the lug. Kill 3, bring 5 to 60, reset wall at 40, he called towards the booth. A startled tech echoed. Copy. 3 down, 5 at 60, wall at 40. The hum softened, the flicker smoothed, the wall returned to crisp gold. 30 seconds from first strobe to full recovery. The audience applauded instinctively, then laughed at themselves for applauding a man who had, technically, only done his job. The MC clapped too, then pivoted with expert speed. And we are back. Live television keeps us honest. He gestured past Marcus. Next question for contestant 9. The narrative river fled forward. The men in tuxedos resumed saying the right things. Up in the press gallery, the split screen had already formed. Half the writers typed variations on humble maintenance hero. The other half shrugged. The show must go on. In the control booth, Kenneth leaned an elbow on the back rail and addressed no one in particular. Charming interlude, but the optics returned to plan. His smile held a quiet malice. The failure had not been accidental. And yet, the repair had been faster than he liked. The final segment arrived. The MC turned to Catherine with a ceremonial flourish. Ms. Kingsley, you have met 10 extraordinary men. The nation awaits your guidance. The room went still. The orchestra held a single trembling string, cameras tight into her face. Catherine stood. The chair retreated into the floor with a soft, mechanical sigh. She looked at each man as if reading a line of code for errors. Surgeon, founder, Olympian, advocate, firefighter, influencer, philanthropist. Her gaze returned to Marcus, the man still kneeling by the stage pocket, hand on the dimmer pack, not posing, not pleading, simply ensuring the system would hold. Catherine lifted the microphone, her voice carried without effort. This company exists to build what works, to serve what matters, to stand when the lights fail. She paused. Something like air moved through the theater. She turned to Marcus. You, for now. The words fell like a stone in a lake. Rings of shock moved out to the cheap seats. A gasp, a hush. Then 100 conversations began without sound. In the wings, Karina blinked, then exhaled, astounded, but relieved by how clean the headline would read. On the back rail, Kenneth's lips curved, not in surprise, but in promise. He watched the maintenance man straighten, watched the audience attempt to process a choice so far outside the choreography. watched the camera find Catherine's profile as if to ask, brave or reckless. By midnight, the nation argued in living rooms and comment sections. Is this a national embarrassment? Has corporate America finally lost the plot? Or is this exactly the courage we keep saying we want? The debate burned like dry timber. Every clip replayed the same beat. A woman with a fortress of rules, a man with oil on his hands, a choice that refused the script. And beneath the noise, beneath the fast twitch judgment, a new current began to run, thin as a filament, bright as repaired light. The sense that something honest had slipped past the stagecraft and would, before long, change the story's center of gravity. The penthouse at the top of Kingsley Tower was less an apartment than a private ecosystem, a world in which glass walls drank the skyline, polished stone reflected morning light like calm water, and the air itself seemed curated. When the elevator doors slid open, Marcus stepped out first, scanning the entryway with the quiet vigilance that never left him. His duffel hung from one shoulder. Kira's smaller backpack was slung over the other. The girl's fingers were knotted in his hand, not fear exactly, but a tether against the strangeness. Catherine stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, backlit by the fading blush of sunset, her silhouette sharp against the horizon. On a nearby console table lay a leather-bound folder, thick enough to intimidate a junior attorney. She turned toward Marcus, gesturing to it without ceremony. "The agreement," she said. "House rules, schedule, boundaries, and the non-negotiables." Marcus set his duffel down, flipping the cover open. The document was neatly tabbed. Curfew, 10 p.m. Restricted areas. Level 2 server room. Finance archive. No physical contact outside of public engagements. Advance notice for any guests. He scanned silently, the military part of his mind, noting how much it resembled a standing orders manual. Kira wandered a few steps into the living room. Her eyes darted over the expanse of pale marble, the soft gray sectional big enough to swallow her childhood bedroom. A sculpture of frosted glass caught the last light, scattering it in fractured rainbows across the floor. She didn't smile, not fully. She just squeezed Marcus's fingers tighter, as though afraid if she let go they might both disappear. Catherine noticed, her jaw softening before she caught herself. "The guest suite is down the hall to the right," she said. "Kira's room is adjacent. Fresh linens, stocked pantry. You'll find the list of approved household staff on the kitchen counter." "Noted," Marcus replied. His voice was even, but his eyes moved. Mapping exits, structural lines, blind corners. He'd always been this way in new spaces. That first evening was a slow dance between distance and inevitability. Marcus carried their bags to the suite, unpacked only the essentials, then began to move through the penthouse with the same quiet care he might give a new piece of machinery. Near the built-in library, he noticed a leaning shelf, one screw from giving way under the weight of hardcovers. Without asking, he crouched, adjusted the bracket, and tested it with a push. It held. Later, on his way back from the kitchen, he passed Catherine's closed bedroom door. Without knocking, he set a small tray on the floor. White porcelain cup. Herbal tea steeped to just the right color. He didn't wait for thanks. He just walked on. By the foyer console, a photo frame lay tilted, almost imperceptibly. Karen's face, warm, composed, smiled from behind the glass. Marcus straightened it, pressing the stand so it would stay that way. Small things, each one so minor they might have gone unnoticed, except Catherine did notice. She caught herself standing in the doorway between her study and the living room, watching him adjust a shelf with the patience of a craftsman, or place a tea tray without intrusion. The warmth that rose in her chest startled her. She wasn't supposed to feel anything but guarded. She reminded herself, sternly, that she had built entire empires on the discipline of emotional distance. By midweek, that discipline faced its first true test. Kelvin arrived in the evening, tablet in hand, his usual stoicism edged with concern. "We've detected irregular activity in the building's central control," he said. "Access logs show someone used a high clearance badge to override environmental settings on 3 floors, including this one." Catherine's brows knit. "High clearance as in?" "Executive level," Kelvin confirmed. "Yours, Kenneth's, or—" he hesitated. "A cloned copy." Marcus was standing a few feet away, Kyra at the kitchen island sketching in a notebook. He didn't speak, but his eyes sharpened. "You check camera logs?" he asked. Kelvin nodded. "Working on it. Whoever did this knew where the blind spots were." Catherine exhaled slowly. "Tighten monitoring. No one moves without my knowledge." The air in the room shifted. Marcus didn't miss it. High-clearance interference wasn't just a security breach. It was a message. By morning, the headlines had caught a different scent. A gossip blog ran a photo of Marcus and Kira stepping out of the elevator onto the penthouse floor. The caption read, "From boiler room to boardroom, CEO's maintenance man moves in. Is this professional?" The debate flared in predictable patterns. One camp framed it as a modern fairy tale, the other, a lapse in corporate standards. On social media, armchair analysts questioned Catherine's judgment. A few whispered that the arrangement must be part of a PR stunt. Marcus ignored the chatter, the way a soldier ignores weather he can't control. Kira stayed close, more fascinated by the view from her bedroom window than by any noise beyond it. Catherine, however, felt the commentary like static in her blood. This had been her idea, her rules. But the reality of someone living inside her carefully fortified life was beginning to pull threads she hadn't realized were loose. And somewhere in the shadow between the penthouse and the server room, an unseen hand still held a high-clearance key. The warmth of those small, uninvited kindnesses lingered in the corners of her home, but now they were shadowed by the faint, unmistakable scent of intrusion. The question wasn't whether the rules would hold. It was who might be waiting to break them. Wind strafed the glass walls like a drummer testing a snare. Rain snapped against the terrace. The city flickered as a storm crawled over the river and shouldered into Midtown. In the penthouse kitchen, the overheads blinked once. The induction range chimed a protest. Then the whole place fell to a velvet hush as the power died. For a single beat, Catherine heard only her own breath. Then across the shadowed marble, a match rasped. A flame cupped itself in Marcus's hand like a small, obedient son. He moved with the calm of a man who had rehearsed emergencies for half his life. Candles appeared along the counter. A stubby camping lantern glowed under a steel mixing bowl for diffusion. Warmth pooled in islands, where light touched stone. "Battery backup on refrigeration holds for 6 hours, he said. His tone was technical, easy. "We should cook what can be cooked. Keep the doors closed. Ride it out." Catherine leaned at the threshold. Stormlight cut her profile into angles. She watched him open a pantry drawer with the gentleness one reserves for an old friend. A blue box slid free. Elbows pasta. Another drawer offered butter, milk, a brick of sharp cheddar wrapped in paper. He set a pot on a butane burner he had already clamped to a trivet. The flame hissed low and faithful. Kyra padded in wearing wool socks, hair gathered high, a pencil tucked behind her ear. "Storm night rules," she announced, with the certainty of a 9-year-old who had seen a rulebook or two. "We vote for mac and cheese." She looked to Catherine, as if seeking permission from a headmistress. Then to Marcus, as if the vote had already passed. "Motion carried," Marcus said. The faintest smile walked along his mouth and retreated. He salted water, tested the boil with an instinctive glance, whisked butter and flour until they formed a glossy paste, folded in milk, grated cheddar over the pot. The smell climbed into the room like a memory with a chair at the table. He did not perform. He fed. Catherine took a seat on a stool. Her hands rested on the quartz. The coolness grounded her as the storm prodded the glass. Candlelight softened everything. Even her rules looked less like a fortress and more like a map drawn in pencil. "You have done this before," she said. "On ships, on roofs, in shelters after a hurricane," he answered. He poured the pasta into the pot. Steam kissed his forearms. "You learn to make a small circle of normal. You hold it steady. People breathe easier." He plated with method. 3 bowls, 3 forks, a folded dish towel under each, as if this were a mess hall that believed in manners. Kira climbed onto the stool beside Catherine, made a polite attempt to wait, failed, scooped, declared the food a victory. Catherine took a careful bite. The sauce landed on the exact square where hunger and comfort intersect. The silence that followed was not the punitive kind that had ruled her childhood. It was a working silence, hands and hearts busy with the same task. Eat. Listen to rain. Stay warm. "Kira," Catherine said. The name felt strange and right at once. "What do storm night rules require after dinner?" "Board games, reading, or telling true stories," Kira replied. She chewed, pointed at Marcus with her fork like a judge. "Dad has the best true stories, but he censors them." "Appropriate curation," Marcus said, a dry note under the warmth. He set his fork down, wiped his hands on a towel, looked at Catherine with a question that did not reach his mouth. She nodded once. The court allowed testimony. "I was Navy search and rescue," he began. His voice found a middle register shaped by water and wind. "You train for the chaos, then you train to find the simple thing inside it. One night off Carolina, a fishing boat took on water. A father and son on the deck. The boy frozen, the father yelling, the radio spitting numbers that did not line up with the sky. We dropped. Rotor wash turned spray into needles. The winch screeched. I hit the water with that first cold that wants to take the breath God gave you." He paused, not for effect, for accuracy. I got the boy by the life vest. He looked at me like I was either an angel or a problem. We went up. The father followed, both shaking. The storm tried to keep its share and failed. Catherine did not move. Something inside her recognized the cadence of truth when it steps into a room and takes off its wet jacket. "And afterward," she asked, "how do you come home from that?" "You carry it until the weight tells you where to put it down," he said. He accepted another forkful of mac and cheese as if fueling, not feasting. "Sometimes you put it in a story. Sometimes you put it in salt on pasta water. Sometimes you put it in a toolbox so your hands stay honest." Candlelight braided itself into his features, steady eyes, a jawline nicked by a life of work. She let the warmth expand. Then, as quickly, she folded it. There were rules for a reason. "I have a story," she said. The word seemed to surprise her as much as anyone. Kira angled toward her. Storms make unusual listeners. "I was 19, Catherine said. My father had a partner who was also my fiancé. Everyone said we were inevitable, a perfect merger. Family and firm. The week we announced the engagement, a contract went missing. The partner blamed a junior analyst. My father blamed me. Said I must have been careless. Or worse, distracted. I was neither. The partner had taken it. The story never mattered to the men who needed a culprit. The engagement ended. The partnership did not." She realized her hand had tightened around the fork. She set it down. "My body learned my lesson faster than my mind. If a man reached for me, My skin stung. Sometimes my lungs forgot their job. The media called it a quirk. I called it policy. Kira leaned her shoulder into Catherine's arm. It was a light touch, a child's benediction. "Storm night rule," she whispered. "No one is the culprit when we tell the hard parts." Catherine blinked. The room swam into focus around two anchors, a father on a sinking boat, a 19-year-old on a sinking life, both learning to live in different weather. A phone on the counter buzzed against stone. Kelvin's name lit the screen. Marcus swiped to answer, put it on speaker. The lantern cast his forearm in clean lines. "Talk to me. City grid is stable," Kelvin said. His voice rode static. "But Kingsley Tower and the adjacent two buildings are dark. The outage is isolated to our complex. Weather is real. Cause is not. Someone used a high-clearance routine to trip our protection. It routed failure to us." Catherine's posture sharpened. The circle of normal contracted. The storm outside felt suddenly less like an act of nature, more like a cover. "Who holds that clearance?" she asked. "3 profiles, yours, Kenneth's, and a ghost credential that mimics a legacy admin," Kelvin answered. "I am locking down elevator permissions, restricting remote access, posting a team in the control core. Pull the badge readers for the last 6 hours. Cross with camera timestamps. Check rooftop relay logs," Marcus said. The list came out like muscle memory. "Storm is noise. The signal is in the sequence." Kelvin exhaled, appreciative. "Already moving. I will report when the cameras tell the same story as the metal." The line clicked. The kitchen returned to candle and rain. Kira glanced at the window, at the city blinking back to life in scattered grids. Not their grid. "Does this mean bad guys?" she asked. Not afraid, simply collecting data. "It means someone wants our attention," Marcus said. His tone remained even. The same tone he had used on the elevator floor, with a crying child in his arms. "They have it." Catherine stood, paced once to the window, watched the river chop under the wind, watched a barge push a stubborn wake. The mac and cheese sat warm in her chest. The story sat warmer. The rules did not feel broken. They felt briefly human. She turned back to the table. Storm sound softened to a drumline under conversation. "We will hold the circle," she said. She surprised herself again by using his phrase. "We will eat. We will wait. We will not hand our fear to whoever wants it." They cleared the bowls. Kyra washed. Catherine dried. Marcus stacked. The domestic choreography steadied the room in a way no press release ever could. After dishes, Kira fetched a deck of cards, dealt with the solemnity of a judge, declared that the winner chose the bedtime story. Marcus groaned theatrically. Catherine raised one eyebrow. The game began. The storm rolled east. The candles shortened. The lantern hummed like a ship's galley light. By the time power surged back, not to the tower, but to the city around it. The three of them had built something small and durable under the pressure of wind and interference, a quiet understanding that had nothing to do with contracts and everything to do with presence. Outside, sirens stitched their way down avenues. Inside, a child yawned. A father checked the locks. A CEO folded a dish towel with unnecessary care. And in that small circle of candlelight, she realized safety wasn't always about walls and locks. Sometimes, it was simply about who stayed when the lights went out. The lights would return. The headlines would argue. Some would call the candlelit meal manipulative. Others would see only a family where there had been none. For now, the circle held. Warm food, true stories, storm night rules. 3 people practicing the simple discipline of staying. The boardroom of Kingsley Tech was a temple of glass and stone. Morning light fell in long bands across the polished table, slicing the faces of those who sat in judgment. The city skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside the air felt close, almost deliberate, as if someone had drawn the blinds without touching them. Catherine sat at the head, posture carved from the same marble as the columns in the lobby, her eyes steady on the agenda in front of her. Kenneth lounged 2 seats down, fingers tapping a pen in a rhythm too precise to be idle. "We need to address the distraction," he said, voice smooth enough to coat a blade. He didn't name Marcus. He didn't have to. Karen, Catherine's mother, shifted in her chair, her pearls catching a thread of sunlight. "The distraction is being managed," she said, but her tone lacked the steel it once carried. Kevin Cho, the oldest investor in the room, and a man who measured risk the way other men measured blood pressure, leaned forward. "Managed is not enough. Perception drives valuation, and right now, it questions your judgment." Catherine's fingers pressed into the edge of her tablet. "Marcus Hale has been vetted. His role in my personal life is not up for board approval." Kenneth smiled, thin, knowing. "We're not voting on your romance. We're evaluating risk, and unfortunately, the two are intertwined." He flicked his pen, and the wall screen behind them came alive. The footage was grainy, angled from a security camera in one of the tower's sublevels. Marcus stood in frame, speaking to a man in a charcoal suit. A moment later, the man handed him a white envelope, thick enough to show corners of bills inside. Marcus glanced down, nodded once, and tucked it into his jacket. A low murmur moved through the board. Kenneth let it breathe before speaking. Timestamp. Last Thursday. The man, Harlan Vicks, has ties to 3 suppliers we've flagged for questionable ethics. Optics, Catherine, are unkind here. Catherine felt the ground shift beneath the table. "Where did this come from?" she asked. Kenneth shrugged, a performance of innocence. "Anonymous dropped to compliance. I thought it prudent to bring it to the board before it found its way into the press." Kevin Cho's voice was slower now, weighted. "This looks like a payoff." Across the city, in a cramped office above the loading bays, Kendra Hale was on her 2nd cup of burnt coffee when her phone erupted with messages. The video was already in her inbox. Links from co-workers, question marks from friends. By the 3rd replay, she was on her feet, fury pacing in her chest. She knew exactly what that envelope had been. The reimbursement for parts Marcus had bought out of pocket to keep the building's water pumps from failing. The finance department's check run had been delayed, so the supplier sent cash through a field rep. She'd been the one to hand Marcus the invoice. Kendra called Marcus immediately. "They're spinning it," she said, voice tight. "I know," Marcus answered. His tone was calm, but she could hear the weight under it. "I'm in the middle of a fire inspection. Keep your phone close." Back in the boardroom, Karina, head of PR, shifted uncomfortably. "The clip is short. No context. We can't confirm what's inside the envelope, and without context." "Without context, the market fills in its own," Kenneth interrupted, "and it rarely fills with something flattering." Karen's voice cut in, cool but brittle. "You could have brought this to Catherine privately, Kenneth, and risk being accused of hiding material information from the board." Kenneth's expression was the picture of wounded professionalism. "I'm protecting the company." The screen froze on Marcus's face, eyes lowered to the envelope, a soldier's stillness in his shoulders. Catherine's mind replayed the elevator rescue, the quiet competence in her kitchen during the blackout, the way Kira clung to him as if he were the last safe place in a dangerous room. She felt the tug-of-war between instinct and optics, between what she knew and what the market wanted her to believe. Kevin Cho broke the silence. "We need to commission a risk assessment on Mr. Hale. Discreet, but thorough. If this is nothing, fine. If it's something, we cannot be blindsided." Karina hesitated. "Public reaction will split. Some will see this as due diligence. Others will see it as throwing a decorated veteran under the bus. Kenneth leaned back, the faintest smirk touching his mouth. Then we make sure the ones who matter see it the right way. Catherine's jaw tightened. You have your assessment, she said, though her voice carried no warmth for the decision. But I'll be the one to speak to him first. The meeting adjourned in a shuffle of leather chairs and clipped goodbyes. Kenneth lingered just long enough to meet Catherine's gaze. A silent message passed between adversaries who shared the same table, but not the same war. When the room emptied, Catherine stayed seated, staring at the frozen image on the wall. The envelope seemed heavier now, not with cash, but with consequence. She knew Marcus wouldn't take a bribe, but the truth wasn't the only currency in play here, and in the boardroom, perception could bankrupt a man faster than any lie. In another part of the city, Kendra typed furiously, pulling receipts, supplier confirmations, anything that could dismantle the insinuation before it hardened into fact. She would burn her own career to keep Marcus's name clean if she had to. Outside, the wind had picked up again, rattling against the high glass. Inside, the trap had already been sprung. The news came down just after noon, carried not by an official memo, but by Kenneth's calculated choice of messenger. A junior from HR, pale and stammering, knocked on Marcus's workshop door in the service level. Mr. Hale, the board has decided to place you on temporary suspension, pending investigation. Marcus didn't ask who decided. The fingerprints were obvious. He only nodded once, the kind of nod that belonged to someone who had been through orders before, orders that didn't care about fairness. Upstairs, in the penthouse, Kate stood near the balcony, hands clenched behind her back. She had rehearsed the words in her head, how she would explain that this wasn't personal, that the company had procedures, that appearances had to be managed. But when Marcus stepped in with Kira beside him, those words felt like glass in her mouth. It's for the good of the company, she said finally. Her tone was measured, but her eyes betrayed the pull of conflict. Until the investigation is complete, you can't stay here. Kira's small fingers tightened around her father's hand. We didn't do anything wrong, she whispered, as if her voice might crack the marble floor. Marcus crouched to her height, his voice even. Sometimes, Pumpkin, truth takes time to catch up. He glanced at Kate. No anger, just a steady weight of disappointment, and then turned toward the hallway. The elevator ride down was silent, the kind of silence that presses against the skin. When they stepped into the lobby, snow had begun to fall in slow, deliberate flakes. It was the first snowfall of the season, and it seemed to swallow sound as they walked through the revolving doors into the cold. Kira shivered, and Marcus stopped to zip her coat all the way to the top, pulling the hood snug around her face. He adjusted the scarf she insisted on wearing backward, then crouched again so his eyes were level with hers. His breath left a faint cloud between them. Listen to me, he said softly, the edge of a smile warming his words. We are still home. No matter where we sleep tonight, where you are, that's where home is for me. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the white glow of the street lamps. She nodded, and they started walking again, their footprints trailing behind like a fragile ledger of everything they carried, but didn't say. Up above, the penthouse windows glowed gold against the steel-blue evening. Kira's gaze lifted toward them, and for a moment her step slowed. Marcus followed her eyes but didn't look away for long. The cold was sharp, and they had a long walk to the subway. Across the street, half hidden behind the tinted glass of a waiting town car, Karen sat in the back seat. She had not planned to be here. A meeting nearby had ended early, and something, perhaps intuition, perhaps guilt, had drawn her to the curb just as Marcus and Kira emerged. She watched them move through the snow, Marcus slowing his pace so Kira could step carefully over icy patches. She saw the way he adjusted his stride to match her shorter legs, the way his gloved hand never loosened from hers. When he stopped to kneel and zip her coat, Karen felt a sudden physical ache in her chest, the kind she had not felt since Catherine was that age. Her driver glanced in the rear view. "Ma'am?" Karen waved him off, eyes fixed on the pair disappearing into the curtain of snow. She thought of her daughter upstairs, standing alone in that cavernous penthouse, and wondered, not for the first time, if she had raised Catherine to protect her image at the expense of her heart. By the time Marcus and Kira reached the corner, the wind had picked up, tossing snow in swirling arcs around them. Marcus tightened his hold on her, leaning slightly to block the gusts with his body. Kira's small laugh at the way his hair caught flakes, like a dusting of sugar, was the only sound in the frozen air. On social media, the scene was already spreading. A bystander's phone video had captured the two of them crossing the plaza. The tall, broad-shouldered man in a worn military jacket, the little girl in her mismatched scarf, both framed by falling snow and the distant gleam of the penthouse windows. By nightfall, the comments were divided, but fierce. How can they kick out a man who saved a child? Optics or not, this is heartless. Rules are rules. If he's clean, he'll be back. But the most shared clip wasn't Marcus leaving the building. It was the moment he crouched in the snow, pulling Kira's coat tight, and told her, "Where you are, that's home." Viewers replayed it, shared it, argued about it, but most simply wrote, "This broke me." Back in her car, Karen sat long after they were gone, the windows fogging from her breath. She thought about calling Catherine, about telling her what she had seen. But she knew her daughter well enough to know that a seed planted at the wrong moment might never grow. Still, the image of father and daughter, framed by snow and lamplight, lodged itself deep in her. She would keep it there for now. Seeds needed time, and sometimes the right storm, to take root. Morning drew a pale line across the Hudson. The city exhaled steam from rooftops. Kingsley Tower stood quiet as a sealed instrument. Catherine woke before her alarm. Snow still feathered the terraces. Last night's decision lay heavy at the edge of her bed, like an uninvited guest. She brewed coffee that tasted too clean. It did not cut through the dull ache behind her eyes. At 7:20, the penthouse intercom chimed. The concierge spoke in a careful tone. A child had left an envelope at the front desk. No return address, just a first name. Kira. A runner brought it up in a plastic sleeve as if it were evidence. In a way, it was. Catherine took the envelope to the kitchen island. Her hands hesitated at the flap. Then she slit it with a paring knife. Inside lay a single page torn from a school notebook. The letters were big and careful. The spelling stumbled. The message did not. "Dear Miss Kingsley, please do not leave my dad alone. He gets quiet when he is brave. I can tell. We did not take anything. He only takes care of things. He took care of me when the storm made the windows shake. I think he can take care of you too. Please do not make him sleep without a home. I can share mine. It is small, but it is warm. From Kyra Hale." A small sticker of a sailboat sat crooked in the corner. A thumbprint smeared a line of pencil. The last words had looped into a heart. Catherine read it twice, the first time as a CEO who had conditioned herself to meet every feeling with a contingency plan. The second time, as a woman who had once been a daughter, whose letters did not change anything. The kitchen door opened. Karen stepped in, wearing a quilted coat, and a look that fought for neutrality and lost. She accepted the page when Catherine handed it to her. She read as if she might memorize it. When she reached the line about sharing a small home, she pressed her fingers to her mouth. A sound escaped her, something fragile and unguarded, the kind of sound that does not belong in boardrooms. Tears slid past her knuckles. She did not apologize for them. "She is asking you for mercy," Karen said. The words were soft. They carried a lifetime of weathered authority. Not charity, not indulgence, mercy. Catherine stared at the page. The sailboat seemed to move in her peripheral vision, a trick of light and guilt. "I have to protect the company," she said. The sentence rang like a bell. It was not an excuse. It was a creed she had learned to recite when feeling threatened to flood the room. "Protect it from what?" Karen asked. The question was gentle and surgical at once. "From decency." Before Catherine could answer, the private elevator chimed again. Kelvin Ortiz stepped out with a folder tucked under his arm. Kendra Hale followed, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep and anger. Kelvin inclined his head to Karen, then set the folder on the island next to the letter, as if he were placing a second heart on the table. "I pulled the control core logs," Kelvin said. His voice was steady, his jaw was set. "I matched badge activity to camera timestamps and power events during the storm. Whoever tripped the protection routine used a high-clearance credential that does not belong to Mr. Hale. The credential spoofed an executive badge. It also used a legacy admin profile that should be decommissioned. This was deliberate, precise, done by someone who knows our system map." Kendra slid a printout forward. "I brought the receipts," she said. The words shook slightly, then strengthened. "That envelope in the video, reimbursement for parts Marcus bought out of pocket when finance was behind schedule. The supplier sent cash through a field rep. I logged the serial numbers. Compliance has the memo. He did nothing wrong." Catherine looked from the logs to the letter and back again. Logic stacked itself into a ladder. Each rung held. And yet the fall she felt was not toward confusion, but toward clarity. Karina's voice came through on speaker when Kelvin dialed her in. She was already at the media desk. "The clip is everywhere," she said. "Commentators are split down party lines that make no sense. Half are calling him a hothead veteran who took easy money. Half are calling the board cowards. If we do nothing, we look complicit. If we attack the footage, we look defensive. The only thing that cuts through is proof." "We have proof," Kendra said. She tapped the logs. "We have a path into the system that Marcus could not access and would not understand without a clearance he does not hold. We have rebate memos tied to serial numbers and invoices. We have a child's handwriting that tells more truth than half of this city." Karen met Catherine's eyes. "You can protect the company and the truth at the same time," she said, "if you choose to." Catherine set the page down with care. She wiped a small smear of pencil with her thumb and left it as it was. "Kelvin, lock down the legacy admin profile. Audit every executive badge. Shadow access with a second-factor token that only your team can see. Kendra, send your documentation to compliance and legal. Copy me directly. Karina, prep a statement that asserts our commitment to evidence, not rumor. No adjectives, no spin, just process and facts." Karina exhaled through the line, relieved to have verbs that did not end in panic. "Understood. We can film a short address. No questions. 30 seconds. You in frame. Kelvin on your left as security. Kendra on your right as facilities. It reads as accountability." Catherine nodded, then caught herself. None of them needed to see the reflex. "Make it ready within the hour," she said. She closed the folder, turned to Kendra, who, "I should have come to him first last night. I allowed optics to lead. That will not happen again." Kendra held her gaze. "He will not ask for an apology," she said, "but he needs a captain who will fight the right battle." Outside, the snow had thinned to a bright crust along the parapets. Sunlight found its way through low clouds and scattered across the river. Inside, the intercom chimed again. A delivery this time, a small paper bag tied with butcher's twine. Inside, a Tupperware container of mac and cheese and a note in an adult hand. For your long days, from a kid who thinks you look like you need lunch. Signed, Kira, dictated by Dad. Karen laughed through the last of her tears. Kelvin allowed himself a brief smile. Even Kendra grinned with a pride that she tried and failed to disguise. The reaction inside Kingsley Tech unfolded with less grace. In a 12-person meeting on the 23rd floor, a compliance officer argued that protecting the company meant removing liabilities quickly. A junior analyst asked how truth had become a liability. A finance manager muttered that reimbursement in cash should never happen, while admitting that delays had forced bad choices. A product lead said out loud what several had only texted. If our brand stands for integrity, then the brand needs to act like it. Catherine recorded the brief address as planned. She looked into the lens with the same poise that had steadied markets through a dozen storms. Yet there was a new register under the polish, an edge that sounded less like control and more like conviction. Kingsley Tech does not make decisions on rumor, she said. We investigate, we verify, we correct course when necessary. That is how we protect our shareholders, our employees, and the truth. Kelvin's presence beside her spoke to security. Kendra's presence spoke to the ground truth of the building. The visual said what the words could not. After the shoot, the room thinned. Only Catherine and Karen remained with the letter and the plastic-wrapped Tupperware on the island. Karen touched the sticker sailboat again. A small boat can still cross a wide river, she said. Catherine picked up the letter, folded it along its soft creases, slipped it into the leather folder that held her most important papers. Then we had better set a course, she said, and we had better sail it well. 3 days before the Global Shareholders Conference, Kingsley Tower pulsed with the sort of tension that makes everyone speak half an octave higher and walk as if the floor might move. The main auditorium was dressed for spectacle. Tiered seating, wrapped in steel gray fabric, LED backdrops looping the Kingsley Tech logo, and a polished mahogany podium lit like an altar. Every move here would be streamed to millions, from investors in Zurich to tech bloggers in Seoul. Karina Chen stood at center stage, headset snug against her hair, running the media crew through the timing cues. Her voice was clipped, but calm, her fingers tapping a tablet in rapid succession. Slide deck transitions on my count. Camera 2 for Q&A. No handhelds unless I call for them, she instructed. This wasn't just a rehearsal. It was the first impression the world would have of Kingsley Tech after weeks of rumors and leaks. She knew they couldn't afford a single stutter. From the far aisle, Kenneth strolled in, flanked by 2 security consultants in identical black suits. His smile was the kind that doesn't ask permission. We'll be integrating a new security protocol for the live stream, he announced. One that ensures zero interference from outside parties. Karina didn't look up from her tablet. That wasn't in the brief. It's in mine, Kenneth replied smoothly, handing her a printed outline. A secure relay route, custom encrypted, with a fallback server in case of packet loss. My team will manage it directly. To anyone else, it sounded like a safeguard. But Karina had been in this business long enough to recognize when someone was erecting walls in the wrong places. She caught Kelvin's eye across the stage, but he was already moving toward the exit, jaw tight. Later, in the half-lit parking garage under Kingsley Tower, Marcus waited beside a maintenance van, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. Kelvin approached without ceremony, a slim laptop bag over his shoulder. Appreciate you meeting me, Marcus said quietly. Kelvin keyed the remote for his car, but didn't open the door. You said you found something? Marcus motioned toward the far corner, where a service hatch stood ajar. The auxiliary network line. It's been active the last 2 nights, when it's supposed to be dark. Kelvin crouched beside the hatch, unspooling a portable fiber tap from his bag. He connected it in silence, eyes fixed on the laptop screen as data scrolled. Within seconds, his brows knit. "This isn't just traffic," he muttered. "It's a payload." Marcus leaned closer. The green-on-black code flickered in rapid bursts. "English, please." "It's a custom exploit, embedded in the relay Kenneth wants to run during the conference. Whoever's behind it built a ghost admin account into the root directory." Kelvin's fingers moved with surgical precision, capturing packet traces and timestamp logs. From here, they could mirror every internal feed, rewrite data, even trigger failsafes to look like malfunctions. It's not security, it's a trap. Marcus's jaw flexed. "Can you trace it back?" Kelvin's answer came slower this time. "We already have a partial chain. The ghost account used biometric authorization for the final write command. Our system logged the fingerprint hash." He hesitated, as if the words carried weight that might change the air between them. "It matches Kenneth." The name hung there in the garage, heavy and certain. "You sure?" Marcus asked, voice low. "Sure enough to make me sweat," Kelvin replied. "But a match on one command isn't airtight in court. If we move now, he'll claim spoofing. We need more, something that connects the malware, the credentials, and his physical access without gaps." Marcus considered that. In the Navy, they called it chain of custody, evidence that survived both scrutiny and sabotage. "Then we build the chain," he said. Kelvin glanced toward the elevator lobby. "Once he locks the new relay in, we won't be able to touch it without triggering alerts straight to his console. And with the conference 3 days out, he'll have every excuse to test the system at odd hours. That's when he'll cover his tracks." "Which means," Marcus said, "we need to catch him in the act." Kelvin closed the laptop with a snap. "You're not supposed to be involved in this anymore." Marcus smiled without humor. "Neither are you, technically. Guess we're both off the guest list." Back upstairs, Karina was finalizing her media schedule when Kenneth passed behind her, murmuring into his phone. His tone was light, but his eyes, reflected in the polished surface of the podium, were measuring the room like a man checking the exits. She caught Marcus's silhouette at the rear doors, Kyra's knit cap just visible beside him. He didn't stay. Just a nod in her direction before disappearing again. Karina felt the itch of a story forming, one she couldn't yet tell. In the control room, Kelvin fed the captured data into an isolated server. The lines of code replayed themselves like a confession waiting for the right ears. Every seasoned operator knows. Malware leaves a fingerprint as distinct as the one on a hand, and Kenneth's was now part of the building's bloodstream. But evidence has a half-life in corporate wars. Kelvin knew they had hours, maybe days, before a cleanup pass wiped it all. He also knew that moving too fast could spook the very man they needed to expose. That night, as the tower's facade glowed against the winter sky, two narratives were running in parallel, one rehearsed for cameras, one unfolding in shadows. The shareholders would see the first. The truth would depend on the survival of the second. Somewhere between them, Marcus and Kelvin walked a narrow bridge, carrying proof that could bring the whole act crashing down, or set it right. The morning of the Global Shareholders Conference had the feel of a launch pad before ignition, polished, rehearsed, and vibrating with anticipation. Every seat in the vast auditorium was taken, from venture capital titans in tailored suits to industry journalists hunched over tablets. The massive LED wall behind the stage shimmered with the Kingsley Tech insignia, the streaming feed already connected to millions of devices worldwide. Today wasn't just about quarterly reports. It was the public sealing of a multi-million-dollar partnership with Keaton Miles, a move that could double the company's global footprint overnight. Backstage, Kate stood just beyond the curtain, her fitted navy suit catching the stray beam of a spotlight. The makeup artist's last brushstroke faded from her cheek as she inhaled slowly, steadying the part of herself that still wanted to run from any kind of spotlight. She could hear Karina's voice over the comms. 30 seconds to live. Keaton Miles was already seated in the front row, his trademark silver tie glinting under the lights. Beside him, Kenneth radiated confidence, his hand resting lightly on the conference agenda. At Karina's cue, Kate stepped into the brightness. Applause thundered. Cameras pivoted. Flashes sparked. She smiled, ready to speak, when the LED wall behind her flickered. Once. Twice. Then the Kingsley Tech logo fractured into static. A low ripple of confusion moved through the room. The static sharpened into an image. Marcus, frozen mid-frame. A grainy clip of him in the parking garage, exchanging what appeared to be a thick envelope with an unseen man. The words, "bribery scandal," blazed across the bottom. Gasps erupted. The livestream feed carried it instantly to every shareholder, every journalist, every competitor watching from afar. In the front row, Kenneth's mouth curved almost imperceptibly. He rose halfway from his seat, raising a hand toward the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems..." The rest never left his lips. From the shadowed wing of the stage, Marcus emerged, moving with the unhurried precision of someone who had spent years fixing problems under fire. His dark jacket bore faint traces of oil and dust from somewhere backstage. Without glancing at Kenneth, he crossed to the side of the stage and knelt by the locked equipment rack. Karina's voice burst through the comms. "We've lost primary and backup feeds. Everything's routed through the new relay." Marcus didn't answer. His hands moved over the rack's combination lock, spinning it open in seconds. He slid out the hardware tray, eyes scanning the patch panel as if reading Braille. Then he began to type, his fingers striking the keys in a rhythm that suggested muscle memory older than the building itself. Kelvin appeared at his shoulder, whispering urgently, "What's the plan?" "Bypass the relay. Route through an old SATCOM channel. Military search and rescue band. Hardwired failsafe," Marcus said, not pausing. Kelvin's eyes widened. "That's classified. Maybe. Illegal. Not if we call it an emergency broadcast for public safety." Marcus keyed in a final string of commands. "You want the company to survive the hour or not?" Somewhere above, the wall of static shivered. The incriminating clip froze, pixelated, and vanished, replaced by a clean feed of Kate at the podium. Her voice, calm and steady, carried through the restored audio. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are live once again." In the control room, Karina exhaled like someone coming up from deep water. "Signal locked. Satellite channel confirmed stable." Back in the auditorium, the crowd's tension broke like glass underfoot. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then swelling into something closer to relief. Even Keaton Miles leaned forward, nodding appreciatively, his gaze shifting to the man in the wings who had just pulled the company back from the brink. Kenneth didn't clap. Kate glanced toward Marcus, meeting his eyes for a fraction of a second. In that glance was a dozen unspoken acknowledgments: gratitude, confusion, and something dangerously close to admiration. When the program resumed, Kelvin quietly stepped away to a secure phone line. "It worked. We've got the relay logs, time, access points, everything. And the fingerprint match from before? This seals it." On stage, Kate closed the deal with Keaton Miles, the signed contracts projected on the overhead screen for all the world to see. The conference ended, not in scandal, but in triumph. The chaos neatly folded into the narrative of resilience. Later, in the quieter hum of the post-event breakdown, Marcus rolled the spare cable back into its case. Kelvin joined him, his voice low. "That satellite trick. You sure you want that on record?" Marcus shrugged. "Let them argue about the rules." Today wasn't about rules. It was about keeping the truth from getting buried. Kelvin studied him for a beat, then nodded. "You bought us time. Now let's use it." Above them, The LED wall cycled through the Kingsley Tech logo once more, bright, unbroken, as if nothing had ever gone wrong. But in the undercurrent of glances and half-finished conversations, everyone who mattered knew. The day had been saved by a man who was never supposed to be on that stage. The moment the applause for the restored broadcast began to fade, Marcus stepped forward from the wing. He wasn't dressed for a speech. Dark work jacket, rolled sleeves, the faint sheen of sweat from the last 7 minutes of chaos. But the way he moved to center stage silenced the room. Kate, still at the podium, looked at him in confusion. "Marcus?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into the side pocket of his jacket and pulled out a slim black drive, no larger than his thumb. Kelvin appeared from the opposite wing, already feeding the drive into the presentation port. The LED wall behind them went dark for a breath, then lit up with a clean, text-based interface. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, voice calm but carrying to the back row, "I think we should all see how our technical malfunction happened today." On the screen, a scroll of timestamps appeared, access logs from Kingsley Tech's secure network. Each line contained an ID number, a card access code, and a user privilege level. Marcus clicked a key. The logs filtered, collapsing to show only a single account. Admin 00X. At first, nothing about it stood out, until Marcus highlighted the last 3 days. "The account doesn't exist in the official directory," he said evenly, "but it's been making changes to core security systems for weeks. And today, at 10:43 a.m., it hijacked our broadcast relay to run that smear video." A collective murmur rippled through the shareholders section. Marcus tapped again. A new overlay appeared. Biometric scans. Fingerprint data matched to access attempts. "Biometric match," Marcus said. "Kenneth Lang." Every head in the room snapped toward Kenneth. He sat frozen for half a second, then pushed back his chair. "This is absurd." He didn't get further. The side doors swung open, and 2 uniformed officers strode in. Kelvin was already stepping aside, letting them through. "Mr. Lang," one officer said, voice neutral, "you're under arrest for corporate sabotage, fraud, and conspiracy." Gasps broke out as Kenneth tried to pull free. "This is a setup. You can't—" The officer snapped the cuffs on him with a cold finality. Cameras flashed. A few journalists whispered into their recorders, their faces alight. This was the story they hadn't expected. But Marcus wasn't finished. "One more thing," he said, turning back to the LED wall. "This wasn't done alone." A new file opened, an intercepted email chain courtesy of Kelvin's quiet coordination with law enforcement. The headers showed a familiar name, Keaton Miles. The crowd murmured louder. Keaton didn't flinch, only adjusted his cufflinks with a smirk. "Mr. Miles," Marcus said, his tone still level but edged now with steel, "offered to resolve Kingsley Tech's PR disaster if Kate agreed to cede him controlling shares in the company." Gasps again, this time tinged with outrage. Kate's jaw set. She stepped forward, her voice slicing through the air. "We do not sell our integrity," she said, her tone unwavering. "We do not hand this company over to extortionists. Not today. Not ever." Keaton leaned back in his chair, unbothered. "And if you can't recover from the damage? If your precious investors abandon you?" Before Kate could respond, a voice from the second row spoke up. It was deep, steady, and carried the weight of decades in boardrooms. "I'm not abandoning anything," said Kevin Cho, the company's most senior independent shareholder. He rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. "I've seen companies crumble from greed and rise from grit. Today, I put my money on grit, and on the people who still know what the word honor means." He looked directly at Kate. "You have my vote, and my full stake." The room erupted. Applause swelled. Cameras flashed. and for a rare moment in corporate history, the air in the boardroom felt less like a battleground and more like the front line of a victory parade. Kenneth, red-faced and shackled, was escorted out. Keaton's smirk thinned just a fraction as he realized the tide had turned, not in his favor. Kate glanced at Marcus, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. For the first time since the chaos began, she allowed herself a small smile. Not the polished, PR-perfect smile the public knew, but something quieter, warmer. Marcus returned it with a nod, already stepping back from the spotlight. For him, the work wasn't over. But in that moment, the company was still standing. And so was the truth. The boardroom had long since emptied, the echoes of applause fading into the marble and glass of Kingsley Tower. Night settled over the city, a quiet blanket of lights and shadows. In the penthouse, Kate stood alone by the floor-to-ceiling window, her reflection wavering against the skyline. She had faced hostile takeovers, smear campaigns, and public meltdowns, but the past few days had cracked something in her she had believed unbreakable. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Karen, holding a slim envelope. Her expression was unreadable, a blend of caution and something more tender. "I thought you should see this," Karen said, stepping inside. She placed the envelope on the desk and pushed it toward Kate. "It came from an old contact of mine in the press archives. I didn't realize. Not until I saw the photo." Kate hesitated, her fingers brushing the rough edge of the paper before sliding it free. Inside was a faded newspaper clipping, the ink softened by years. The headline caught her eye first. "Navy Rescue Team Saves Students in Mountain Accident." Her breath slowed. She remembered the incident instantly. Sophomore year. A hiking trip with classmates gone wrong. A sudden storm had trapped them on a narrow ledge, freezing rain soaking their clothes. They had been hours from hypothermia when the rescue team arrived. She had been half-conscious when strong arms lifted her, when a low, steady voice murmured, "You're safe now. I've got you." The photograph was grainy but clear enough. The rescue team stood in a staggered line, gear strapped to their backs, snow clinging to their uniforms. And there, at the far left, his head turned away but his frame unmistakable. Broad shoulders, the way his weight shifted slightly to one leg, the curve of his neck. It was Marcus. Kate's throat tightened. She traced the outline with her fingertip, a rush of recognition flooding in. The same build, the same quiet steadiness. The man who had pulled her from that cliff edge all those years ago had been the same man who stepped into the malfunctioning elevator just days ago. And he had never said a word. Her voice wavered. How long have you known?" Karen shook her head. "Only today. He never mentioned it, Kate. Not to me, not to anyone. I think he didn't want you to feel like you owed him anything. He just did what he's always done. He saved you, and he walked away." Kate's vision blurred. For years, she had built walls around her trust, her heart, her very ability to believe that someone could act without wanting something in return. And yet, here was proof, carved in newsprint, that someone had done exactly that. Twice. She sank into the chair, clutching the clipping as if it were a lifeline. The weight of the years, of suspicion, of distance, of carefully curated independence, seemed to press in all at once. Karen's voice was softer now. "Sometimes, the universe gives us second chances. This feels like one." Kate swallowed hard, blinking away tears she had never intended to shed in front of anyone, not even her mother. "I've spent 30 years, making sure no man could ever get close enough to hurt me again. And all this time, the one man who could have never tried. He just kept me safe." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. She stood abruptly, still holding the clipping. "Where is he?" Karen offered a small, knowing smile. "He didn't go far. You'll find him." Kate glanced down at the photo again, her fingers trembling slightly. This wasn't just coincidence. This was a thread running through years, tying two moments of life and death together. It was humbling, disarming, terrifying. And as she turned toward the door, she realized, more than anything, it was warming her in a way she hadn't felt in decades. Later that night, in the quiet penthouse, Marcus found Catherine and Kira curled up on the couch, a blanket draped over them. On the coffee table sat a mug of cocoa, steam curling like the memory of storm night rules. Kira, half asleep, reached out and placed the little sailboat sticker into Catherine's hand. "For you," she murmured. Catherine closed her fingers around it, feeling the edges press into her palm. A small, perfect reminder that some harbors are worth sailing into, no matter the storms before. Somewhere deep down, she knew the question would linger in the minds of everyone who learned the truth. Was it fate, or was it chance? But in her heart, it didn't matter anymore. She just knew she wasn't going to waste the second chance she'd been given. Snow still clung to the shoulders of Kingsley Tower like a white shawl when Kate found Marcus in the service corridor outside the control core. The hum of servers vibrated through the concrete. The smell of solder and cold metal filled the air. He stood with Kelvin, reviewing a printout of network logs. The paper looked small in his hands, as if facts could be folded into submission. "Marcus," Kate said. The single word carried years she had not spoken. Kelvin stepped back with the quick instinct of a man who recognized a conversation he should not occupy. He slipped into the control room and let the door whisper shut. Marcus faced her, calm as always, alert as ever. The new steadiness in her eyes told him this was not a briefing. She was not in a suit. She wore a gray sweater and the kind of resolve that does not need shoulder pads. In her hand was the leather folder that had governed their lives. "I need 5 minutes," she said. "You can have them," he answered. She opened the folder. The thick contract she had drafted so carefully stared up at her like a map to a country she no longer wished to visit. Without ceremony, she took the first page by its corner and tore. The sound echoed bright against the pipes. She tore the second, then the third, the stack giving way to a small snowdrift of paper at her feet. "If you agree," she said, voice low but unwavering, "I want to sign a different contract. Not 30 pages of rules, one line. Not temporary, forever. I am done pretending distance is strength. It kept me alive. It did not let me live." He held her gaze, the soldier and the builder and the father, all visible at once. "Forever is not a word I use lightly." "Nor do I," she said. "But I have proof. You saved me twice. Once on a mountain I barely remember. Once under lights I will never forget. You never asked for anything, not even thanks. I know what you are made of. I know what I have been afraid of. I am not afraid now." Small footsteps padded down the hall. Kira appeared with a knit cap in her hands and a gravity that belonged to someone who had already learned storms by heart. She looked from the paper scraps to their faces. She understood enough. Marcus knelt to her level. The move had become a liturgy in their house. "Home is where you feel safe," he said gently, "not where a lease says you sleep. If we say yes to something bigger, I need to know you feel safe here." Kira glanced at Kate. The girl's eyes searched for something that could be trusted. Kate did not reach. She learned from a lifetime of forcing closeness that true closeness waits. "I do not want to replace what you had," Kate said. "I want to help you keep what you have. A kitchen with mac and cheese, a deck of cards, storm night rules. If you let me, I will guard those things with my name." Kira stepped forward and wrapped her arms around Kate's waist. The hug was quick and sure, a vote cast without fanfare. "I want to be here," she said. I want us to be here. Marcus exhaled, a sound that was part relief, part surrender to a future he had not let himself imagine. He rose, nodded once, the nod of a man accepting new orders that he helped write. Then yes, he said to Kate. No fine print, no asterisks. Our contract is service and steadiness. I will sign it every morning. The corridor held the moment like a chapel. Then the spell broke with the buzz of a phone in Marcus's pocket. He checked the screen and frowned. Across town, in a cramped office with a view of loading bays and sky, Kendra had sent a single line. Check your secure inbox now. He opened the encrypted mail on a side terminal. Kelvin reappeared at the doorway as if drawn by weather. Kate and Kira stood close, not intruding, present. Marcus scrolled. Kendra had forwarded an anonymous tip with attachments, screenshots of calendar exports, a list of private briefings, access logs tied to the PR floor. A single name surfaced again and again. Casey Lin, assistant to Karina Chen. Kelvin's mouth thinned. That is the second leak this quarter. Whoever bought Kenneth thought to hedge their bet. Marcus zoomed the metadata. Timestamps formed a ladder up to the day before the livestream attack. They sold schedules and room numbers, not code, not keys. Still enough to stage a smear, enough to time a hit, he said. Kate lifted her chin. The old rule-keeper in her wanted to slam every door at once. The leader she had become chose precision over panic. We do not torch the floor to kill one rat, she said. Chain of custody, interviews, digital forensics. Karina deserves the dignity of truth, not friendly fire. Kelvin nodded. I will pull the door readers for the PR suite, cross with Wi-Fi device IDs and outbound SMTP logs. Legal will need clean lines. If Cassie moved this, she did it from a shadow client or a coffee shop extender. We can triangulate. Kira looked up at Kate, worry beginning to pucker her brow. Is the bad part coming back? She asked. It is holding on where it can, Marcus said. He softened the words with a hand on her shoulder. But we know the map now. Once you know the map, the dark is smaller. Karina arrived within the hour. She entered the control core like a woman braced for weather. Kelvin briefed her in a calm, surgical voice. The name landed between them like a dropped tool. Karina flinched, not at the thought of betrayal, but at the face attached to it. Cassie has been with me since I left Network News, she said. I trained her. I trusted her with my calendar, my travel, my badge while I was on set. If she sold us, I want to be the one to fire her. You will be, Kate said. Compassion sat beside steel in her tone. But you will not do it alone, and you will not do it angry. We do this clean, or the story becomes us. Karina looked at Marcus, then at Kelvin, then at Kate. The triangle of unusual allies steadied her. Understood, she said. I will bring her to conference room B in 20 minutes. No theatrics, just facts. They dispersed with purpose. In the quiet that followed, Kira leaned against Marcus's side. Kate gathered the shredded contract pages into her hands. She did not throw them away. She placed them in the leather folder with Kira's letter and the mountain rescue clipping. Artifacts of a life moving from fear to covenant. On the way to the elevator, Marcus caught Kate's hand, a small act that would have been impossible a month ago. She did not flinch. Her skin did not rebel. It recognized the warmth and settled. There will be more weather, he said. But we know how to hold a circle. We proved it. We did, she answered. Then, after a beat that felt like a vow, we will. In the lobby, phones buzzed with new chatter as news of Kenneth's arrest rippled through the markets. Commentators praised swift justice. Skeptics wondered what else lay under the floorboards. Older viewers, the ones who remembered companies built on handshakes and kept by oaths, wrote simple lines that read like blessings. Keep going. Hold the line. Choose honor. Upstairs, the family stood in the doorway of the penthouse. The city spread before them, the light slanting gold across the river. Kira scampered to her room to fetch a deck of cards. Storm night rules did not require storms. Marcus carried in a paper bag with hardware store tape, a new deadbolt for the server closet, a literal answer to a metaphor. Kate set water to boil. She would learn the mac and cheese recipe by heart, not to perform, to feed. The day's happiness did not dissolve under the weight of caution. It deepened because of it. A contract had been torn. A promise had been made. A fuse had been found burning in the walls. They would snuff it together. When the knock came for Conference Room B, Kate squeezed Marcus's hand once. Kira lifted her chin like a small captain on a new sea. The family stepped into the hallway with the quiet confidence of people who had decided who they were and what they would defend. The next chapter would belong to repairs, to reckonings, to building a house that could not be bought or breached. For now, they walked toward it, steady, aligned, unafraid. The week after the storm, both digital and human, Kingsley Tower felt different. The marble floors no longer echoed with whispers of scandal, but with the quiet, deliberate footsteps of people putting things right. In Conference Room B, the blinds were drawn halfway, and the air held that peculiar stillness that comes just before a truth lands. Cassie Lynn, Karina's assistant, sat with her hands folded tight, eyes darting between the security reports on the table and the faces across from her. Karina kept her voice even as Kelvin presented the forensics. Outbound traffic logs, time-stamped email dumps, a trail so precise it could have been etched in glass. "You know the company policy," Karina said finally. "You also know me. I trained you to be better than this." Cassie's shoulders slumped. She muttered something about pressure, about promises from friends in competing firms. But it was a confession more than a defense. The termination papers slid across the table. She signed without looking up. No gavel, no shouting, just the quiet closure of a door that would not reopen. Karina stayed. She didn't flinch from the work of repair. That same afternoon, she unveiled a plan to make Kingsley's internal data governance fully transparent. Real-time dashboards for key operations, open to the board, and vetted third parties. "If sunlight's the best disinfectant," she told Kate, "then we'll build skylights." Meanwhile, Marcus found himself back in the service bay. Only this time, it wasn't to fix the building's bones. It was to build something new. With Kelvin's help, he cleared a corner of the maintenance workshop and set up 3 long tables, each with a battered toolkit and a tangle of wires. Flyers went up at the community center. Navy skills for neighborhood youth, electrical basics, mechanics, discipline you can use, free. The first Saturday, a dozen teens showed up, half curious, half skeptical. Marcus greeted them with the same calm authority he'd used on deck at sea. "We'll start with a lamp," he said, placing a stripped cord and socket on each table. "By the time you leave, you'll know how to make it light. And by the time this course ends, you'll know how to keep the lights on when the world wants them dark." Back in the penthouse, small changes were taking root. One night, while Marcus was wiping down the kitchen counters after a class, Kate slipped on an apron and joined him. "I've never been anyone's sous chef," she admitted, holding out her hands for instruction. "Rule 1, Marcus said, handing her a knife. "Don't try to outrun the cook." She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that had air in it, not armor. Kira wandered in, carrying a notebook with a cover she'd decorated in marker. She set it on the counter like it was official business. "House Rules 2.0, she announced. Marcus dried his hands and leaned over the list. 1. Dinner together. No excuses. 2. No phones at the table. 3. Everyone helps clean up. 4. Storm night rules can happen even without a storm. 5. Always say good night. Kate traced the last rule with her fingertip. This is a better contract than the one we started with, she said. 2 nights later, during a board review meeting, Kevin Cho arrived late, his long coat still dusted with the last breath of winter. He waited until the agenda was nearly done before clearing his throat. Before we adjourn, he said, I have a proposal. He glanced at Marcus, then at Kira, who was sitting quietly in the back with the sketch pad. Our company owes a debt to service, military service, and the service of those who keep our communities running quietly. I'd like to establish a scholarship fund in Kira's name, dedicated to the children of veterans, education, mentorship, the works. It's time we invested in futures as fiercely as we defend profits. For a moment, Marcus didn't move. The room seemed to tilt slightly, as if the weight of the offer had shifted the floor. Kira looked up from her drawing, eyes wide. Me? She whispered. You, Kevin said, because sometimes the smallest hands plant the biggest seeds. Marcus swallowed hard, a rare breach in his steady composure. I don't have words for that, he said. Good, Kevin replied with a smile. Then we'll let the fund speak for itself. That night, dinner was mac and cheese again, Kira's request, though Kate insisted on adding a green salad, because contracts go both ways. They sat under the warm light of the kitchen pendants, no phones in sight, laughter trading places with comfortable silences. Through the glass, the city glimmered, but inside, the house felt like its own world, one they had put in order, not just by closing doors, but by opening the right ones. The news cycle moved on. The comments under the company's official channels shifted from outrage to something quieter, warmer. Viewers over 55 left notes that read like handwritten letters. Proud of you. Service matters. Teaching the next generation is the best legacy. Marcus kept the flyers pinned on the community center board. Kate kept the notebook of house rules on the kitchen shelf. And Kyra, without ceremony, started working on a new list, one she refused to show them yet. For now, the house stood steady. Not perfect, but honest. And in the balance of work and dinner and promises kept, the warmth spread, room to room, street to street. Like the glow from a light you know will stay on, the boatyard smelled like cedar shavings and salt. Gulls traced lazy arcs over the slips. The river moved with the patient rhythm of a lung. Under a canvas awning, an old sloop sat on jacks, its hull sanded down to a soft, chalky mat. Marcus stood with a brush in his hand, sleeves rolled, sawdust clinging to his forearms like pollen. Kira balanced on a step stool beside him, tongue tucked at the corner of her mouth as she laid a careful stripe along the keel. Kate, in a faded ball cap and paint-spattered jeans that had no place in a boardroom, stirred a pail of marine enamel until it gleamed like poured moonlight. Port side is yours, Marcus said, offering Kate a wider brush. Starboard team, report. Kyra saluted. The gesture landed somewhere between Navy and 9 years old. Starboard team, ready. They worked in an easy silence, the kind that grows only after storms have passed and people have kept their word. Every long stroke of the brush erased a nick. Every tap of a bristle filled a scar. The hull seemed to exhale under the touch. When they finished the first coat, Marcus stepped back to admire the curve where paint met waterline. She looks younger, Kate said. She looks honest, Marcus answered. He reached for the stencil he had cut the night before. He centered the letters between chain plates and pressed them flat. Kate held the edges while Kira dabbed paint into the cutouts with a small sponge. When they peeled the stencil away, the name stood crisp and certain against the new white hull. Second chances. On the pier, Karen sat with a plaid blanket over her knees, a thermos of tea at her side. The winter sun made a halo out of the silver in her hair. She watched the three of them like a person watches a sunrise, not with surprise, but with gratitude that it came again anyway. Kelvin arrived and took a quiet seat on the bench beside her, a tablet tucked under one arm. "You look like you brought news," Karen said, pouring tea into the small metal cup. "Good news," Kelvin replied. "Audit complete, legacy credentials retired, biometric mismatches purged. The network is clean, the company is safe. We added a visible log the board can read in real time. Transparency is now a feature, not a favor." Karen raised the cup to him. "To clean houses and clear water." Down on the dock, Marcus slid the sloop into the sling. The yard crane lifted her slow and certain, swung her over the river, and lowered her into a cradle of ripples. She settled with a sound like a sigh. Kira clapped once, quietly. Kate's hand found Marcus's forearm and stayed there. They stepped aboard together. The deck planks were warm underfoot despite the season. The canvas sail lay furled like a sleeping thing. Kate coiled the dock line. Kira checked the small basket she had insisted on bringing. Apples, a deck of cards, and a folded sheet of notebook paper that had traveled in a kitchen drawer for too long. Marcus ran the halyard. The sail climbed the mast with a whisper and caught the wind with a shiver. "Cast off," he said, a captain's words softened by family. Kate loosed the stern line. Kyra untied the bow. Second Chances nudged free from the dock and turned her nose toward open water. They glided past Karen and Kelvin on the pier. Karen lifted her hand. Kelvin tipped an invisible hat. The river broadened. The city stepped back, its glass no longer pressing against the skin. Wind filled the canvas. The sloop leaned into the breeze. The wake unfurled like a ribbon that tied past to present. For a while, none of them spoke. There was no need. The mast hummed. Rigging chimed. Shy sun pooled in Kate's open palm, where she held the mainsheet. She looked at Marcus, at the way he felt the wind through the soles of his feet, as if listening with his whole body. A thought rose like a tide, and reached her mouth before caution could stop it. "I spent 30 years learning not to trust a man, and only a moment to know you were the one." Marcus kept his eyes on the water. The smile that moved across his face was small and true. He reached for her hand, not to claim it, but to answer it. Dignity and kindness. Be patient. They always make harbor. Kira leaned against the cockpit combing, face tilted to the winter light. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Now," Marcus said, easing the tiller. "We sail. We eat apples. We promise to make it back in time for chores." "House Rules 2.0, Kate said, fighting a grin. "Number 3, everyone helps clean up." Kira picked up the basket and set the apples between them. Then she unfolded the paper. The pencil marks were smudged. The sailboat sticker in the corner had begun to curl. She held it for a moment in both hands, reading the lines silently. "Dear Miss Kingsley, please do not leave my dad alone. He gets quiet when he is brave. I can share my home. It is small, but it is warm. From Kira." She looked at Kate. The woman who had once held that letter like a subpoena now held it like a relic. "May I?" Kira asked. Kate nodded. Her throat worked around words she didn't need to say. Kira kissed the corner of the page, the same way children bless the last page of a favorite book, then stood at the rail. She opened her fingers. The paper lifted, wavered, and set down on the water's skin. The river took it gently. The pencil lines blurred. The paper grew translucent. Then it was gone. Not lost, but changed. Marcus tightened the jib a fraction. The sail filled. Second Chances moved as if she had somewhere to be, and all the time in the world to get there. Kate watched the circle widen in the wake until it disappeared. Then she leaned into Marcus's shoulder and let the quiet hold. Back toward the city, the phone in Kate's bag buzzed. She didn't reach for it. Kelvin's message would be the same in 10 minutes as it was now. Network secure, reputations mended, the scholarship fund seeded, applications already arriving from kids whose parents had worn uniforms. Some stories could wait until the dock. Out here, the talk was simpler. Marcus taught Kira how to read the telltales. Kate learned how to feel the change in the wind a second before the water showed it. They tacked and reached. They traded the tiller. They laughed when the boom swung a hair faster than plan. On the downwind leg, Kate took a breath that felt new, not because the air was different, but because she was. They turned for home when the sun bent toward the bridges and the water turned silver in the slanting light. Marcus eased the sails and let the river carry them. The city opened its arms, as only a home can do for those who choose it. On the pier, Karen stood again, blanket folded now, face softened by the kind of peace that comes after hard choices. Kelvin raised his hand in a signal that said everything and asked for nothing. Second chances kissed the dock with the gentlest bump. Lines went over cleats, fenders squeaked, the boat settled. Kira hopped to the pier and bowed to her audience of two. Karen applauded softly. Kelvin saluted the little captain. Marcus and Kate tied off and stood a moment longer, their hands still on the same line, the knot they made together neat and strong. Later, at the edge of the pier, the three of them sat with their legs dangling above the water. The city hummed behind them. The river answered with its own older music. Kate rested her head on Marcus's shoulder. Kira leaned against Kate's side. The chain of trust ran warm from one to the next. Second chances is a good name, Kira said. It is the right name, Kate answered. It is the true name, Marcus added. They stayed until the first star showed. Kira tried to guess its name. Marcus pretended to debate nautical charts. Kate pretended to be strict about bedtime and failed. When they finally rose, the path back up the pier felt lit from within. Kindness had not made them weak. It had made them whole. Justice had arrived late, the way ships sometimes do when the wind resists them. But when it came, it tied up with a steady hand and a clean line. And the damage it mended was more than corporate. It was generational, it was private, it was real. As they walked shoreward, the sloop rocked gently, as if nodding in approval. Tomorrow there would be work again, and board calls and teenagers asking how to wire a lamp without shocking the cat. Tomorrow there would be lists and lunches and a quiz on house rules. But tonight the map was simple. A dock, a home, three people who had found one another in smoke and storms and decided to stay. The wake behind them shimmered under the pier lights. Then it smoothed, then it disappeared. Not gone, only folded into the river's long memory. Ahead, the future waited with its own tide. They would meet it together, steady hands, clear eyes, hearts that had learned the shape of harbor. And just like that, their story found its safe harbor. But I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from today? Your stories, your towns, your memories, they're all part of this little community we've built together. If you'd like to journey with us through more tales of hope, redemption, and second chances, you're always welcome here. Just tap subscribe so we can meet again in the next story. Thank you, truly, for giving your time and your heart to this one. It means more than words can say.